Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Brian Escott Show. Hope you're doing well. Hope your January is off to a good start. It's, wow, a new year, 2026. Hmm, pretty amazing. It's off to a strong start for Trump, obviously, with the Venezuela news. I will cover that today briefly. You know, in fact, I have four main topics that I'd like to get to today. They are Scott Adams, talk a little bit about him, Venezuela, this concept of looksmaxing, right? And then briefly the relationship between tech and politics. Those are my 4 points for today. But some opening thoughts here. In recent episodes, I've been telling you that I've been playing music lately and getting back into music, listening to music, and discovering artists on Instagram mostly, TikTok too, but really I'm just on Instagram. And I just every day I'm finding new amazing artists. And as I said, in fact, in my previous solo episode, it's so great for talent and it's so cool. And this is just an extension of that. I found another guy. Type in maro.mp3 on Instagram, maro.mp3. This guy is like an amazing guitar player. He does like clean classical. You could tell he's clearly a extremely proficient technical guitar player, and he has these technical pieces, but they're really clean. They're all electric guitar. And what he does is he puts on these really cool masks. He has like a mask that's shaped like a sun. I think he might be from Poland, and he's got like this sun costume. He's got this moon face costume, and he's got this mushroom character now. And I think he might have this like devil costume as well. And what he frames these little 30-second video clips of masterful, gorgeous guitar playing are these little riffs. It's like these characters are trading riffs back and forth in like a guitar off or something, right? And it's just beautifully shot. Everything about it is beautiful, including the music, and it's really cool. And so just add that to some more brilliant content. Who knows how many people helped him make that, but it's just amazing how everybody can have their own channel if you're talented and if you're driven and if you pursue it. So, and you don't need a makeup crew. You don't, there are people just doing it in their car. I mean, and these people are blowing up now as we speak. So, pretty amazing time. Pretty amazing time. Sip of tea. So, check that out if you're into artsy, cool shit. My next point here is that I have nothing left to say on X. My X has become a barren wasteland, and it really is a return to normal now that I think about it, because for 3 years, I tried my hardest to get. It took me all of my creativity from 21 to most of 24 to get from 0 to 4,000 followers, and then I only got slightly interesting when I, in August 2024, decided to follow Kennedy to Trump and became actually like a real supporter instantly and talked about it. And then it was like, oh, you hosted the podcast for 4 years and you were a Democrat your whole life, but you finally did it. You finally have something that we fucking care about. Who cares about your podcast? And so that was, and you get a couple Elon retweets, Elon engagements, and which was pretty cool. And suddenly you're at 45,000 followers, but you're stuck there because you were really never that interesting. You only had that one little interesting moment. And no, I had a good run. I had like a year's worth of pretty fire. I was writing some pretty good shit for about a year, but I'm back to normal. I got nothing. I mean, what can I say? I mean, I'm not an expert. I'm not that interesting. I'm on a journey of self-discovery. That's what this podcast is. That's where I'm at in life. So it makes sense. It makes sense. And so let me just tell you in 1 minute what this show is if you're new. Was a construction manager my entire adult life. Democratic voter my entire life. Obama, Hillary, Joe. Just the house I grew up in, and I just always consumed mainstream media and just figured the Democrats because of my upbringing, had the right side of the issues. And so, pretty simple. Yeah, the Republicans were pretty much bad, in my mind, economically, and culturally. And then for whatever reason, I guess I'm restless. And in 2018, I decided to get myself into law school. Uh, Miracle that happened. Got in to University of San Diego. Amazing, best thing I ever did. Amazing experience. But I was kind of like in a slumber my entire adult life. I was 28 years old when I got into law school. Just voting for Democrats, doing my thing, whatever. And by the time I was 32, in my final year of law school, I did the 4-year program because I was still working at the time, going to school at night. I had it the best. The full-time students had it really hard, way harder than me because they had that extra course, and that was an immense load, especially in your first year. The part-time students like myself who had families and less flexible jobs, they had it harder than anybody. So I had it better than anybody. I gotta say, my job was really great. They worked with me, and it was just the best thing I ever did. I loved law school, and being my father's son, I take two critical race theory themed electives in my final year, and I found them. And so, actually, interestingly, one of them was jurisprudence. You probably don't know this, but those of you who went to law school know that jurisprudence is a standard law school elective. It's teaching the different judicial philosophies for how a judge might do their thing, right? And how that works with constitutional interpretation and all of that's fascinating. Jurisprudence, great class. But this was a CRT flavored jurisprudence class. And so when I say I studied CRT in law school and I took two electives in it and I got an up close and personal experience with the vibe of the students and the material, and it didn't sit well with me, and I realized that I was more of a Ted Cruz type of character than I realized previously. I could tell you about all that. Excuse me, let me have another sip of tea. But without going into all the details, suffice to say that I didn't just learn about the controversial material. I actually learned about how it would be utilized by Supreme Court justices to enact this radical vision that it defines itself as. So I saw that critical race theory was not just an ideology, it was an active instruction. And many people don't get that experience of studying jurisprudence styled CRT. And for that reason, I came out of it going like, oh man, like the right is right. Like they're trying to destroy institutions in inappropriate ways through the judicial branch. And so maybe my mind was contaminated by, that experience I had. But the way I see it, I just happened to get a real insight into what's really going on in this culture war. And so that has inspired. So that shook me up so much, that experience, that I said, I got to start. I was going to start a blog, but I was like, that's too much work. Writing is too hard. Maybe I can start a podcast. And I called it Searching for Political Identity. Started it during that final year. While I was taking those classes, I would reflect on things I learned that day. So if you go back, and I ended up renaming it the Brian Escow Show in like January 2025, after eventually becoming a Trump supporter. But you can actually go back, search the Brian Escow Show, and go all the way back and listen to when I would talk about. You could get the whole spectrum of what I was going through. I would talk about things I learned in class that day. I would interview classmates, not necessarily from those courses, but I interviewed an amazingly high achieving fellow student, Marine, amazing guy who's probably on his way to the Supreme Court. Like literally, he's been a judge in DC for years now. So I grew my podcast, and I talked to people from diverse backgrounds for years. Pardon me, sip of tea. And was clearly leaning towards Trump for the longest time, but truly not until I was a Kennedy guy. I like DeSantis, I like Rubio, I like Vivek, I like the entire Republican bench basically. But when Kennedy emerged, I was like, okay, this works for me. And I followed him. And I've been pretty hardcore ever since. And it's pretty interesting. Puts me in an interesting position. So what I'm continuing to do with this podcast is continue to learn. I mean, clearly I have so much to learn about the issues, but thematically, generally, I like where MAGA is. I've come to conclude that MAGA is a call for normalcy and common sense and and colorblind neutrality. You know what I mean? Instead of this toxic leftist stuff, and it's not the woke right. It's not the small percentage of MAGA that is the toxic stuff that the mainstream media paints the entire movement as wrongly. Um, but there is that dynamic going on. I've been talking about it a lot lately. But yes, a continuing exploration of the political environment, what I believe, become more educated. The idea would be to eventually become not an expert, but someone who can, I don't know, just feel like they know what they believe. That's all I'm after. That's, I just want to be myself, find out what I believe, I guess. I know broadly, like I said, thematically, I like the MAGA concept. And what is the MAGA concept? It's just pride in being American. It's um, realism, as my guest yesterday actually brilliantly pointed out. That was great. He was a great guest, a professor of philosophy at Arizona State University, Turning Point USA chapter leader or something, but great guy. He, realism is a really important point, and that'll come up when I talk about Venezuela in a minute. But yeah, that's what this show is. Am I going to be a Republican forever now? Probably not. I hope I hope it comes across to you that I would go for a Democrat if they put forth a reasonable, compelling policy proposals and they seemed competent. But I haven't seen that. So this particular political environment, despite the legitimate controversies that Trump has been involved in over the years, all together, I voted for him, and I do not regret it. I don't. I just can't say that I do. All right. But I don't want to be adding to the division. I want to be looking at people who disagree and say, you know what? I think you're coming from a good place. Not everyone is driven by pure, but a lot of people do have Trump derangement syndrome. That's the thing. So it's a mess. It's a mess right now. Public sentiment. But I can't be dishonest. I don't, I like Trump. So anyway, the last few months of content, I've been leaning heavily into the alien question, the non-human intelligence question, because the disclosure narrative has been so prevalent on X. Everyone's talking about it, unless you're living under a rock. I guess I've been kind of vaguely interested. I mean, I'm a guy who would watch Ancient Aliens, so that kind of stuff for years now, for 7 years maybe. Looking back on it, so I guess because I was like, have I always been interested in aliens? I don't think I have been, but no, I guess it's been about that long where I would like watch documentaries and stuff, right? And think, oh, that's cool, just be open minded, always thinking about big questions and stuff about mythology, society, whatever. That's my jam. But in the last, I would say, year and a half, I had a conversation with a guy at a random dinner party. Won't tell that story again because I've told it too many times recently, but which made me go, oh, maybe they are real because this guy would know. And like, wow, that's crazy what he said. He said, I'm not crazy for thinking that it might be real. And it seemed like a legitimate conversation. What the heck? Then I saw this UAP back in March. I talked about it even in my last solo episode. So I won't talk about it again. And everyone's talking about it. At least a lot of people are. Joe Rogan has set up this alternative media structure. And I'm not saying he did this like intentionally, like he's just really cool. And because he's so successful, this media structure has been built up where these things are being talked about. And obviously, a lot of it is nonsense, but is there some truth being revealed as a result of this alternative media structure that's arisen. Sip of tea, but it's very much in line with the theme of who are we? Who am I? What do I believe? What kind of person do I want to be? What kind of society do I want to live on? This is what's really important. And to cut to the chase here, little preview of something I'm going to say later. To be MAGA for me, to be a reason, what do I want? What do I want to believe in? Well, it's just the cultural stuff is clear to me. You got to forget, drop the narrative about oppressors and settlers. Live in the present. Let's talk about today and get rid of all the toxic cultural ideologies. That leaves the economic question open for debate. And people will talk about libertarianism, anarcho capitalism, free markets, let the markets do its thing, decentralization. Then people will talk about no. Once you have um, a society that is not tearing itself apart culturally, and no, that doesn't mean all white. Sorry, Groypers. There is a contingent of people who would say once you get all the non-whites out, MAGA's not talking about that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about once you have a socially cohesive, relatively socially cohesive, bonded by freedom and bonded by the individualism. So it's like, think about that. Okay. Once you have a cohesive melting pot back up and running, then you can say, well, should we be a collectivist nation economically? Should we have the warmth of collectivism or rugged individualism? And do we really need to choose? Talk to me about that. The problem is, so often the economic collectivism is completely interlocked with the cultural critique. And so I'm just wondering, can you divorce the two? And what would happen if you did? But let's see if Mamdani, let's see what he does. He's got a great opportunity in New York. I wish him the best. I don't want to blindly be, it'll never work. I don't know. All I know is don't be culturally toxic and good luck. It doesn't seem to me like, I want to say it doesn't seem to me. Where I'm at is I just say, look, the people that I respect with what I'm familiar with, which is the cultural stuff, they seem to be right leaning. And so most of the right leaning people are against socialism, against economic collectivism, just not because they're cruel, but because they believe that society functions better when you have decentralization, deregulation, more choices, more accountability, more feedback in the production cycle. So, trying to figure out what I believe. That's what this is all about. So, let's go to Scott Adams. I'm not one of these people who can say I read his books or he meant this much to me or that, but I will say he's meant quite a bit to me. And the impact he had on me is, I would say, I remember seeing he was like leaving breadcrumbs for people like me. And when I came around to supporting Trump in late 2024, I was kind of psychologically prepared because Scott made it feel like it was okay. Scott was like a former Democrat, if I'm not mistaken, very rational, great arguments, getting you to think critically. And I dig that. And so I said, here's another critical thinker leading the way to Trump. And it wasn't necessarily about Trump, it was about thinking critically. And I appreciate that very much. So he did that for so many people. And therefore, he had an immense impact on the country, on history. I mean, that is not a small thing. I fantasize that I had some minor impact on the election, right? Scott Adams had a legitimate impact on the election. And you can, I think you can be proud of that, Scott. I think you should be proud of that. And it's so sad. He's dying. I just talked about Ben Sass last week. Talked about Charlie Kirk. We've seen so much death, murder, illness in public, and that's part of just technology these days, social media. But we're seeing everything. But how much more can we take is the question, and I guess the answer is we can take a lot because that's what we do when we march on. But this is a big loss. Scott Adams is a beloved figure, a really nice guy. I guess he really became popular in politically in terms of contemporary discourse. He was always a well-known, brilliant commentator, right? Through Dilbert and all that. But he really popped, I think, when he made the comment about it was like a Rasmussen polling a group of black people, and they said, "Do you hate white people?" or something like that, and like more than 50% of the respondents said, "Yes, we do." And Scott went on there and he goes, "Well, that's a hate crime, and I wouldn't want to be around. So I don't want to be around black. I guess I don't want to be around black people then." And it was more of a, "Hey, this is about realism. If this is a legitimate poll, and this is what it said." And so MAGA is about looking at the data and making a common sense conclusion. Um, and that's attractive, actually. So yeah, he's got what cancer does he have? Oh shoot. I'm sorry that I don't recall. I know Ben Sass just said he had pancreatic, which like is just the worst diagnosis. But Scott is apparently near the end. You can definitely sense that based on what he's saying and how he looks, and it's just absolutely devastating. But he's handling it so gracefully. But can you imagine being fucking fully that is actually a form of I mean, that has got to be one of the scariest things to be fully cognitively coherent, cognitively there as you are just physically deteriorating. Oh, and I know it happens every day. And but we're seeing it in this case, and it's just devastating. And my heart is with you, Scott. I know he loves his followers on X, and they love him, and we love him. Um, he just made a statement in the last day or so, I guess, about how he is strongly considering, or probably rather even going to convert to Christianity in his final days. And good for him. I mean, I think I'm someone who wrestles with spirituality very deeply. I believe in God. I'm Jewish. Um, Reform, not that religious. I mean, I deeply believe in God, but I'm not that religious. I'm a questioner. I'm a seeker. I like being Jewish a lot, especially because I don't practice. It's great. But I love talking to people about God and religion, and I love talking to Christians. I interviewed one yesterday, and so it's all great. And people were kind of commenting and saying, "I'm afraid, Scott." Well, of course, some people were saying, "Yes, good for you, Scott. Yes," and some people were saying, "I'm afraid Scott's not quite understanding the gravity of what it means to accept Christ as your Lord and Savior." And that's not my business. I'm just kind of observing it and just wishing Scott the best, everybody the best. Life, man. Oh my goodness. Like I said, if I had a nickel for every time I said "like I said" in a recent episode lately. But one or two back, I was commenting on Ben Sass and others that we've lost. It's just a reminder of staying present and how fragile and how beautiful and valuable, really, more than anything, life is. Um, but we're living in this age of disclosure, and so many people are questioning what life is. Are we living in a simulation? Are we truly living in God's universe where God is real? And no, and just that's the framework of reality that's most accurate. Are there aliens visiting us? Are there crypto terrestrials, they call them, or ultra terrestrials, highly advanced hidden species that are tucked away under the oceans or in the mountains or in other dimensions parallel to us on Earth. Are we not alone? So many people are asking that question. Is it just a matter of technologically we're advancing so much we're about to reach the singularity? Could be any of the above. Most likely the last one, because that's what we have the most evidence for of technological advances that are man-made. But if you're off the beaten path a little bit like I am, listening to some Rogan and his acolytes, if you will, on their podcast and getting into alien shit, it's like, no, it seems like we're really being groomed to be prepared to swallow some weird truth. Who knows? Who knows? But Scott talked about, he referenced simulation theory when he was talking about converting to Christianity. And Elon, of course, talks about simulation theory all the time. So many great philosophical thinkers are talking about simulation theory. And maybe that's the disclosure. Maybe the disclosure is that we are basically in a video game or a digital creation. We are not the base reality. Living in a computer, basically. I don't know. I'm open-minded, but yeah, pretty weird. But it fits in nicely with what I'm trying to do here. It's just explore the world, man. Find out what's true, what's right. Forget the labels, get beyond the labels. Capitalism, communism, socialism. I want to know not only what works, but what's next. And not in like just a progressive to be progressive, because if you got what work, if don't fix if it's broken. But I guess what I'm saying is I'm really interested in how technology will affect politics. And in fact, I'm just getting into abundance, Ezra Klein, Derek Thompson. And in the first chapter here, here's a line: the technologies we develop will shape the politics we come to have. It's not just that the politics we have will affect the technologies we develop. The technologies we develop will shape the politics we come to have. I don't know what the ultimate argument is going to be in this book so far. Actually, not even chapter one. In the introduction, they're basically just saying, we don't make enough of what we need in the United States of America. And that's a problem, whether it be housing or medicine or drones or, we could just build this glorious future. It's kind of the opening salvo here. And, they seem to be more sympathetic with the political left, but really they want to get beyond the labels and just get manufacturing going, I think, in some sense here. And so there's probably going to be things I agree with in this book and things that I disagree with. But I love, and here's a perfect example. Elon talking about, greatest entrepreneur of our time, greatest mind of our time. I'm a fucking huge Elon fan. I love him. I don't think he's a fascist. I think he's a great American. A great American. He is constantly talking about libertarian economics. And that's one of the main reasons I've been like, okay, yeah, no, I like this. The libertarian vibe, decentralized, obviously no cultural toxic ideologies because we're all individuals. The libertarian ideology has no room for a collective worldview, whether it be white nationalism, which is how I know he's not a white nationalist, or multiculturalism on steroids, because multiculturalism itself is great. It's fine. But the CRT, basically, for lack of a better word, where you want to take the multiculturalism and then say, okay, go feast on that host and destroy it. That's the problem. That's a problem. So that's a collective ideology. So the Elon Musk version of politics is none of that cultural bullshit, and economically just deregulate, decentralize. But Even he is quoting libertarian economists all the time. Even he's saying, wait a minute, in like a year or two or three or four, we're going to have UBI where everyone is going to be rich. Money won't matter anymore. So, wait a minute. If that's the case, then that's what I mean with what's next. Is technology going to force us to reconsider politics? I'm interested in that question. Okay, I'm gonna do Looksmaxing in front of and then I'll finish with Venezuela because Looksmaxing, I can do an easier segue here. So whereas I've said that MAGA brings in a guy like Elon Musk, who's kind of libertarian leaning, but it's not pure libertarian. MAGA is strong America. It's common sense America. It favors that libertarian leaning in both directions, but it's going to say, wait a minute, we are Americans, so there's a certain degree of collectivism, and we are going to be proud of who we are, and we're going to take what we need. And that is not necessarily, and we're going to take what we need, we're going to set our boundaries. I mean, that is not purely libertarian by any stretch of the imagination. The pure libertarian would say open borders and no basically border governments are really all evil. And so we should ignore them and just have free trade and free everything. MAGA says, no, we're going to have a border. We're going to prefer freedom generally, but we're going to be concerned with self-preservation. So I kind of like this model of MAGA. That's how I internalize MAGA. And so it's open, it's amorphous a little bit on the economy. It's reasonable, it's adaptive. If that's what Trump is, it's strong, it's bold, it's got vision. I don't. So for Looksmaxing, I was about to go into Venezuela. For Looksmaxing, this is what MAGA is to me. But as I've said, you have this small percentage, but maybe growing and it's been the talk of the town since Trump got reelected. The Groypers, the woke right, the people who think that the new injection of new blood into MAGA, of which I'm a part, is make Israel great again first, or make Israel great. It's heretical. It's poison. They're saying they are the woke right. They're different. They're saying we need to have a very extreme reaction to CRT. We need to reset everything by basically, if not kicking all the white people out of the country, which is probably what they want to do ultimately, definitely impose, like, you have to be a Christian to be in government. They want to set it. They want to set Christian. They want to go, no, the left has gone too far. We need God back. And I understand that, but they want to go too far. And so so think about every sector of society where you could overreact in response to the left being toxic. That's what they want. Looksmaxing, I put in that category. The left has said there are no beauty standards. Everything is fine. Moral relativism, that's the defining characteristic. In a recent episode, I talked about Matt Walsh saying the defining characteristic of the left, which unites all of us on the right, even though we're having our civil war, is moral relativism and the erasure of objective standards. So Looksmaxing is going too far. Instead of saying, no, we need to get back to like having some concept of like objective standards and like not to be like rude to fat people or anything, but let's not be delusional. Looksmaxing goes, yeah, there are beauty standards and objective reality, and it's good to be morally beautiful and true and good, whatever. Fine. But I'm now going to reconstruct my jaw at 20 and go on steroids. And what else did they do? I mean, the whole nine. Yeah. I mean, no. That's weird as hell. That's and I put that in together of I don't know if it's tied into Groyper behavior. But in my mind it is, but maybe we're just living in a society, in a time technologically where body modification is just much more normalized, and maybe it doesn't have anything to do with being far right or but I would bet that it does. But it's just strange. And so Looksmaxxing, yes, made viral. The term made famous by that kid who claims he ended JD Vance's political career by calling him fat. Um, yeah, Vance, Rubio's stock is so up with Venezuela. Let's get into Venezuela, but I've always said I love Rubio. I said it last week when I was talking about how I think Vance is well suited culturally to bridge the divide that is MAGA, but Rubio's obviously the next guy in the conversation and in many ways a superior candidate in his own right and arguably better suited to be the next commander in chief in so many ways. So I love Rubio. I'd vote for him in a heartbeat. Um, I guess the argument there is rather than being the guy who can surf the wave and ride the divide, as Vance was between these two groups on the right and lead with intelligence and conviction, Rubio could just charge ahead in what his vision is. It's been so aligned with Trump that he could just say, listen, I don't have time for this. Not that Vance gives the woke right the time of the day, but Rubio's play would just be like, look, competence, America first. I've done it. I've proven it. I don't need to listen to the clowns on the far right who are saying, we're Israel's slave. We know what we're doing. So strong arguments for Rubio. But Venezuela, okay. I was talking to my dad on Thursday night. He had us over for dinner. It's a great time. And he's not a Trump fan. Okay. He respects Trump's talent, but he's not I don't think I'm speaking out of line here when I say that he doesn't respect Donald Trump as a human being. He doesn't think he's a good president, and he has nothing good to say about him, despite acknowledging how weak the Democrats have been and ineffective and all of that. And the last thing I'll say is my dad is very well read, and you better come with your facts if you're going to argue with him. And so, right or wrong, he's a formidable guy, and I respect him. So we're talking about politics for whatever reason, and I just said, he's like, he's just like flabbergasted that I could be condoning the strikes on the ships and the buildup in the Caribbean and all of this. And I said, Dad, and he doesn't buy the deterrence argument for fentanyl. I said, okay, well, if you don't, okay, fine. All I said is this, Dad, look, I don't know what the president is thinking. I don't have all the information he has. I just know that he believes strongly in deterrence and his governing style is to err on the side of forceful execution of the law, forceful enforcement, brutal enforcement as a deterrent. And I don't have a huge problem with that. No, you think I like people being killed that shouldn't be killed? No. I'm so I don't have a huge problem with you coming at this from the perspective of it's wrong to take human life innocently. Oh, and he didn't have a declaration of war, and so maybe it's not constitutional. I don't have a problem with you doing that. That's fine. All I know is I don't know what he knows. I kind of trust him, to be honest with you. He seems to be in alignment with so many figures in the administration, which is not necessarily an indicator that what's happening is morally right, but he doesn't seem to be doing something psychotically on his own. This seems to be and he just had his national security doctrine release, which is essentially the Monroe Doctrine on repeat. That everyone's calling it the Don Roe Doctrine. So I'm seeing this fitting within a strategy, a framework here, and I'm going, clearly he's acting what he believes are Americans' best interests. And all I could say to my dad is, you, I don't think he's running the country into the ground. I don't think he's running the world into the ground. Here he is. All I know is he got Maria Machado. Why do you have Maria Machado? Just awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in exile. She would have been the president, right, in Venezuela if she hadn't been illegally barred from running by Maduro. She's awarded the Peace Prize. She dedicates it to Trump. And actually, my dad said she was just sucking up to Trump. Okay, I don't know. All I know is, why is the administration in line with him? Why is The opposition in exile who just awarded the Peace Prize, singing his praises. I mean, this doesn't seem to be a guy who's making a huge mistake to me. So, and then we have this lightning capture, this, yesterday, and it's like, wow, I'm not prepared to speak intelligently on it and give a historical perspective on it. All I know is it seems impressive, and I not going to lie to you and say that I'm not proud of when I see our military executing expert missions with high competency. That's cool. I'm a red-blooded guy. I mean, it's pretty freaking cool. I love the pictures of him looking. So I don't want to be a dumbass who just likes pretty pictures on TV and is happy because we're winning. But back to this idea of MAGA being about real politics and realism and common sense. This is the Matt Walsh perspective. Matt Walsh is now back from his new Christmas hiatus on X, and one of the first things he said is, "I don't have a problem." This is Matt Walsh speaking. I don't have a problem with. Um, so I don't necessarily agree with his statement that international law is fake and gay, and that's what everyone is saying. And clearly, it's like we can just do whatever we want because you're strong. I'm not necessarily saying right is might is right, but I don't necessarily have a problem with a country acting forcefully to ensure its own interests. Like maybe it is okay at a certain point for a country to say, no, because of the geopolitical situation, we are going to make a move here and we're going to do it to preserve our interests, not out of anything other than self interest. And there's something almost honest about that and kind of pure about that. Is it right? I don't know. Are we securing resources for America while doing the right thing by the citizens of Venezuela? Sure seems like it. You know, everyone is celebrating. Seems good to me. I don't know. It's crazy. It's a historical time. People say that Trump is a man of history. That theory of that there are great men. There are great men in history that just by the singular force of their own personalities change the course of history. And that Trump's one of them. It sure seems that way. And I'm telling you, I just think it seems to be going in the right direction. To be determined, right? But I'm not ready to like I was telling my dad, as he's going down the you think this war's not over. I'm like, Dad, I'm not ready to judge him on tariffs. I'm not ready to say he's a failure because he didn't end the war that erupted under Biden's watch between Ukraine and Russia. I just I just see a guy running the show, running it well, and he's funny as hell, and I like him. He's not perfect. He's a he's a flawed human being, just like me, just like you. Um, and I understand that there are certain controversies, particular dating back to before I became a supporter, that are troubling, and they were troubling to me. And there's some cognitive dissonance there, and I admit that. But I'm living in the present, and this is my testimony. This is where I am now. So let's keep doing this together. I'll see you next week. All right. Next week, I'm interviewing a guy named Doug Jones. He's running for governor in Maine, Republican business guy. It's going to be great. See you there. Take care.